Hey everyone, this is Miles, the author and narrator of these stories. If you're confused by the title or are new here, this episode is a little different than usual. Instead of one, there are two shorter stories that are connected in ways I will let you figure out. That's all I'm going to say for now. So, without further ado, enjoy this week's stories. Welcome, friend. Follow me. We're going where nightmares are born. Most people would never dare enter these woods. There's no telling what horrors we'll find, the disturbing terrors we'll uncover. Don't say I didn't warn you. Unsettling creatures lurk here. Be careful, they might follow you out. Or maybe they're already inside you, in the spaces between your thoughts or under your skin. Are you afraid? Good. Now you are ready to enter the Warning Woods. Removed. Samuel Nash felt a twinge in his chest as he pulled back the curtain. Practically constant flashes of lightning backlit trees bent at 120 degrees and power lines blown into hovering curves. He watched an unfortunate crow fly backwards. Probably got blown out of his tree, Samuel murmured. He looked back, realizing his wife could not have heard him. Ginny couldn't handle thunderstorms. She sat on the chair behind him with her back to him, wearing noise-canceling headphones. By God, what a difference those had made the past 10 years. Samuel didn't have clinical anxiety like his wife, but the storm torqued something inside him as he peeked through the curtain. Weather like this had excited him as a younger man. Now, 72, he'd seen his fill of what violent storms could do, though. He felt the twinge again, this time in his left shoulder. It wrapped a claw around his heart and twisted. He fell onto the curtain, catching himself on the window pane. The wind blew rain against the glass, sounding like a crashing wave. He mouthed, "Ginny," but his voice got tangled in another knot of pain that tightened in his chest and shoulder, feeling like it wanted to bind them together. His atrophied left bicep twitched sporadically when he tried to lift his arm. He floundered forward, grasping the back of Ginny's chair. She started at the impact, screaming as she twisted around. Samuel collapsed beside the chair. He watched himself go down. His wife's anxious face remained fixed in his vision. She stood and looked at him lying face down on the hardwood floor, gasping like a fish. Ginny's hands covered her mouth. She fell to her knees beside him, tossing her headphones aside as thunder rocked the house, rattling the windows and shrinking her. Her hands searched his back and arms for what she knew not. His gasping ceased. Samuel shouted, "What are you looking for? The reset button? Call 911, woman." He heard his voice, dry and echoless. It sounded no different than his incessant internal monologue, the voice that hadn't shut up for 72 years. Lightning flashed brightly enough to reflect off photo frames and metal fixtures even through the curtain. The lights went out. Ginny threw herself over his motionless body and wept. "I'm not dead yet, do something," Samuel shouted in her ear. She perked up for a moment, stilling her breath and holding her tears. But then her head fell onto his back again. He somehow felt her trembling as he looked down from above. He pleaded, "Ginny, help me!" But she did not hear him. Eventually, she jerked upright and crawled to her chair, beside which her cell phone rested on an end table. She called 911 and told the dispatcher, "Please, my husband collapsed and he's not breathing." Physical sensations abandoned Samuel. He remained aware of Ginny's voice, the thunder, wind, and rain, only as vibrations. Colors became brighter and objects lost their hard edges. He had to concentrate to keep everything in focus. Each flash of lightning turned everything white. The storm moved south before the ambulance arrived, Rain still pattered gently on the roof, but the wind no longer blew it against the window. Thunder rumbled distantly. The sporadic lightning wasn't strong enough to pierce the curtain anymore. Ginny stood behind the paramedics while they tried everything in their power to bring Samuel back. He waited impatiently for his body to let him back in. He fiddled with his neurons like wires disconnected from their battery. He tried to catch the pulses from the AED the medics shocked his chest with once, twice, 3 times, but they slipped from his grasp every time. After the 4th pulse, the medics looked at one another. One shook her head. The other stood and turned to Ginny. She buckled, swaying away from her chair. The paramedic lunged to catch her shoulders, guiding her into the seat as his colleague radioed the inevitable outcome of their delayed attempts to revive Samuel. Ginny's sister Eileen stayed with her that night, embracing her for hours as they both cried on Ginny's bed. Eventually, Ginny fell asleep, exhausted by grief. Eileen made her own bed in the guest room. The storm had passed. The power returned. Samuel set out to find his body and correct the fallacy of his death. The ambulance brought his remains to the funeral home. Samuel found it easily. The paramedics wheeled him into an elevator and took him to the basement under a blue tarp. No one stood outside the doors when they opened, yet Samuel sensed the attention of a crowd. He exited behind the paramedics, following them into a dark hallway lit only by lights above 2 doors at the end. The shadows on either side of the hallway rippled as Samuel passed. He felt the static of attention on all sides and heard a breezy whispering void of words. Through the furthest door, a young mortician in a white button-up shirt received Samuel's body and oversaw its transfer onto a metal drawer. The mortician pulled back the tarp. Samuel could see why everyone thought he was dead. The mortician slid the drawer into the wall and turned a latch to lock the drawer in place as a few gray wisps hovering below the room's white lights watched. They bore no human shape, but a human feeling. For some time after the paramedics hurried to their next call, Samuel waited in that white-lit room, watching the mortician type on his computer, taking frequent breaks to text someone who frequently made him smile. Samuel yearned for Ginny in a way he'd forgotten years ago. He entered his body's drawer and aligned his glowing ethereal limbs with their cold corporeal twins. He searched for some pathway to connect his consciousness with his limp brain. None revealed themselves to him. He ruminated in the perfect darkness about an observation he'd made on his flight to the funeral home. He'd noticed the accelerated speeds of cars and people below him. Until that point, he'd only noticed subconsciously the uncanny speed with which the paramedics and mortician performed their duties. He'd never been much of a reader, let alone of such silly nonsense as science fiction, but although the concept of time dilation was novel to him, it made perfect sense. Time is measured by the physical characteristics of Earth, and nothing physical held any sway over his current form. With mild horror, he realized, due to his hastened journey through time, he may have been lying in the drawer for hours or days. Light burst in. He wondered if it might be the light that everyone always talks about. The light at the end of the tunnel. Was this the moment the universe finally decided he was dead? A hand reached in. It took hold of the drawer. Samuel floated out in time to watch his body emerge, looking about the same as before. The mortician carted him into the room behind the second door. The gray wisps watched them enter, but did not follow. A table in the middle of the room waited to receive him. Beside it, on a smaller table, rested tools which made Samuel wish he could turn away. He could not. He remained constantly aware of everything around him. The mortician rolled a machine over to the table. 2 hoses dangled from it, with pointed metal tips on their ends. He made a slit near the base of Samuel's neck. It did not bleed. His flesh simply opened to allow the mortician to insert one of the metal tips into his neck. Samuel could not vomit or pass out. These physical mechanisms for stress reduction denied him. He had but one option to escape the horrid revulsion of watching himself transform into a statue. He fled the funeral home. He rocketed into the sky, into the daylight, floating higher and higher. "Heaven take me," he thought as he burst through clouds. He tried to leave Earth's atmosphere but sensed a growing disconnection that scared him. He paused in a liminal space not quite day or night. He could see distant stars and planets as bright as the sun. He watched the Earth turn beneath him. Unlike in the drawer, here he could watch time pass. Airplanes crisscrossed below him like flies, seeming to teleport from one place to another. He could see a storm moving in, dark clouds alive with blue lightning. The storm, which had begun to build on the east coast, now approached the middle of the country directly below him. He thought of Ginny, how storms terrified her. This would be the first she experienced without him, unless, of course, he went back down to be with her. He revised his request. "Heaven take me after this storm. I'm coming, Jenny." He propelled himself straight down, aiming his trajectory using his soul connection to Ginny. Something inside him knew how to find her. He broke through the storm, carrying its energy with him. It buzzed across his arms, up his legs, even crackled in his eyes as he flew face first toward the town spreading below him. His soul steered him through the rain, past the funeral home, past their house, to the outskirts of town, where black umbrellas huddled together like a cluster of mushrooms sprouting up in the cemetery. Ginny stood nearest to a rectangle of fresh dirt. Thunder boomed as Samuel crashed into the mud, causing the small group of attendees to shriek and fall back against one another. Clumps of dirt rained on their umbrellas. The lightning Samuel brought down with him opened a black crater in the center of the fresh grave, partially exposing his casket. He'd done it. Samuel awoke in total darkness. Having attended so many funerals over recent years, he recognized the smell inside the casket. Somehow, he'd never imagined himself giving that stale yet earthly scent. He heard voices faintly above. He tried to draw a breath, to shout, to alert the small audience of his return. He couldn't wait to tell Ginny he'd never really left, that he'd only been removed from his body for a short time. His lungs would not respond. He could feel them both, heavy bags lying on the back of his ribs. He gasped, unable to draw any air. His frozen limbs remained that way. He used the final dregs of buzzing energy from the storm to shock his heart into action. It pumped twice, but what it sent through his body was not blood. It did nothing to relieve the desperation of suffocation. He gasped soundlessly as white light encroached on the perfect blackness around him. He screamed internally, hoping maybe something in Ginny, some deeply connected part of her, would hear him, force someone to open his casket and let in some air. But the air wasn't the problem, and he knew it. He'd seen what the mortician did to his corpse. He could fill his lungs with all the oxygen he wanted, but without blood to transport it, what good would it do? Re-shoveled mud rhythmically thudded against the lid, a firm backbeat to the pattering rain. If Ginny had forced the casket open, she would have found a peaceful corpse with its arms crossed over its chest, the only sign of the wretched turmoil happening inside it, the eyes rolling back and forth behind their glued lids. After a few agonizing minutes, those eyes went still again. Samuel Nash vanished into the light. Lapsed. Officer Carson Montreux raced up the winding highway. He felt like he was in Star Wars. The rain streaked toward his windshield like stars, stretching as he pressed the pedal down, making the jump to hyperspace. His red and blue lights flashed on the road in front of him and the surrounding trees in the short breaks between white flashes of lightning. His call, an old man having a heart attack, was not something he felt prepared to handle on his own. But with everybody else tied up with other storm-related incidents, trees over power lines, car accidents, the medical call fell to Officer Montreux, who really preferred to be called Carson. He prayed he'd remembered to pack his new CPR mask. Otherwise, this old guy would become the second person he'd ever kissed. He'd married the first. He wondered if it would be a good or bad idea to imagine her lips if he had to. He slapped himself. Not literally, but equally as effectively. He knew stigmatizing the act could make people more hesitant to deliver life-saving CPR, and here he was doing it to himself. He told himself he was just using humor to reduce his stress. All in vain. As he rounded a downhill bend, he'd just been up the hill checking on a men at caller claiming they'd seen a swarm of angels in the sky. A fallen tree made an unexpected wall as tall as his patrol car. He jerked the wheel and hydroplaned, colliding with the tree hard enough to reach the trunk through the tree's plentiful branches. Fortunately, due to his slide, the car's tail end absorbed the majority of the impact. It still jerked him halfway into the passenger seat, making him knock his computer onto the floor. His airbags stayed contained, but the windshield cracked. The lower right corner buckled inward, allowing rain to trickle in. Carson remained dazed until a nearby lightning strike jolted him into focus. He looked where his computer should have been, confused why it wasn't there. Then he saw it on the floor. Unbuckling, he reached for it. While he locked it back into its stand, he radioed dispatch to tell them he'd crashed. His lieutenant, shouting over heavy rain on his end, radioed, "Dispatch, let's get someone else on that heart attack ASAP." "Sir, all other units are busy. Want me to pull someone off another call?" Carson gave his car a little gas and found it still seemed to be running okay. He pulled away from the tree with relative ease and radioed, "Dispatch, my car's a little beat up, but I can continue. Just gotta find a way around this tree." "Sure you're good, Montreux?" asked the lieutenant. "I'm good, sir, thanks." He set the radio down and started looking at the map on his screen. Only one road went up and down the hill. There was a mountain bike trail and multiple walking paths, but none wide enough to drive his cruiser down. He'd have to drive back up the hill and down the other side, then circle back. He hoped the old man could hold on that long. Knowing the road he'd already traveled was clear, he raced back up the hill faster than he'd descended. He could hardly hear the thunder over his raging engine. He'd already lost so much time. Driving recklessly across both lanes, using whichever he needed to while taking curves without losing too much speed, he passed the house where his original call had been, then headed back downhill. From the top, he could see clear bolts of lightning striking the woods below. He prayed it wouldn't start a fire. He didn't think he'd ever seen a storm quite like this one. Craning his neck to look through the window, he searched, although he wouldn't admit it, for angels. He maintained speed as he reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Montreux." No response. He listened, hearing only warped static. He checked his map to see where his next turn was and tried again. "Dispatch, do you read me? This is Montreux." He heard a voice this time but couldn't make out any words. The static sounded louder than the rain. In fact, it was louder than the rain. Realizing this, Carson looked up from his computer, which wasn't updating properly anyway. Raindrops still speckled his windows, his windshield still dripped water onto the dash, but the rain had ceased falling entirely. The lightning stopped too, and the thunder. He set his radio down and focused on the road. The dry road. He felt nauseous. Something about the storm felt off, but its sudden end made it feel straight up unnatural. He arrived at the address, no thanks to his buffering map, 15 minutes after the call came through. An embarrassing and, he feared, fatal response time. He didn't waste a second grabbing his first aid pack out of the trunk and jogging to the front door. Vaguely, he noticed the yellow sky. Sunset. not a cloud in sight. The air smelled faintly of sepulchre and carried a small amount of humidity, but nothing close to how he expected it to feel after such a monster storm. He rang the doorbell. No lights were on inside the house. He rang the bell again. At one end, a window lit up. Moments later, an elderly woman opened the front door and squinted at him through the screen. She clocked the first aid pack hanging from his right shoulder and gave him a concerned look. "What's going on?" she asked. "Ma'am, where's your husband? We got a call about a heart attack." The woman froze. She slowly shook her head and backed away, not in a manner he perceived as an invitation to enter, but a cautious retreat. Carson leaned back to double-check the house number and tried to radio dispatch again, receiving only the garbled static he'd heard the first time. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked. "There's been a mistake," she said, clearly wrestling with a powerful emotion. "What mistake?" asked Carson. "My husband," she whimpered. Carson asked, "Ma'am, can I come in? Where is he?" She, clutching her hands, said, "He died." Carson put his hands on the storm door handle. "Ma'am, I need to come in and check on him." "He died almost a year ago." Carson didn't know why he looked to the clear yellow sky at that moment. Perhaps it was his subconscious trying to give him a hint, a clue, as to what in the world was going on. "He died of a heart attack," the woman continued, "during that awful storm we had last April. Ambulance didn't get here in time." "No," muttered Carson. "Excuse me?" the woman asked, indignation shading the edge of her tone. "Sorry," said Carson. I think there might have been a bit of a mix-up with dispatch. Something's not... I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am, and sorry for your loss." He ran back to his car and sped away from the house. He stopped a couple of blocks away, just far enough to be out of sight, and pulled up his computer. However many thousand times he'd glanced at that screen, he'd never seen it frozen before. It glitched at him arrhythmically while displaying the map. His avatar, a tiny blue car, still showed him at the base of the hill. After each glitch, the tiny car moved forward a mere pixel's distance on the screen. He held down the power button to shut the computer off. When he tried to reboot it, it would not power on. "Montreux to dispatch," he radioed. Still just static, and those distant, garbled voices not meant for him. He slumped. What the hell is happening? He tried to push away a thought that nudged him like a pestering dog, but it started to bark. "You're dead. You died when you hit that tree. Everything since has been a hallucination. You're dreaming. Maybe that means you're in a coma. Whatever it means, this isn't real. You have to wake up." He slapped himself for real this time. He slapped himself harder. He took out his taser and shocked the inside of his left elbow, causing his arm to flail so hard he accidentally honked his horn. Embarrassed, he drove around the corner and down a few more blocks. When he'd turned the car, he'd felt his gun press into his side. It gave him an idea to ponder after pulling back over. He considered the many nightmares he'd experienced of being shot. He always woke up just as someone pulled the trigger on him, never after the bullet made impact. He rested his hand on his pistol, drumming his fingers on its knurled grip. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. I could just shoot my foot, right behind the toes where it'll pass through without hitting bone. He took the gun out slowly, feeling its weight, seeing if it felt right, felt real. It did, but that didn't stop him. He tilted his foot away from the gas pedal and took aim, gripping the trigger just above the safety and focusing on the sight. He inhaled, holding his breath, gritting his teeth. "Nope," he muttered as he relaxed. He holstered the gun. It felt too real. He wasn't dead and he wasn't dreaming. He wished that brought him any comfort. He decided to return to the police station, Maybe others would have found their way back there too. Maybe they could all put their heads together and figure out what happened to the storm. Or maybe someone already knew. Maybe they would watch Chet Watts, the meteorologist, break it all down on the briefing room TV, call Chet a nerd, and get on with their shifts. Halfway to the station, he could no longer deny the disorienting sense that he was going the wrong way. Wrong way. It made him dizzy to the point he could no longer maintain his lane, and other cars were passing him frequently. Everyone seemed to be acting like nothing happened. He pulled into an alley and rolled his window down. The fresh air did not affect his condition. Wrong way. He tried backing out of the alley and orienting his cruiser back the direction he'd come. The dizziness retreated, allowing him to see. He felt certain something wanted him to go somewhere. He dared not dwell on what that something might be. Paying close attention to how his body reacted to each turn, he navigated toward the only place he could think to in that direction: home. He prayed the compelling force wanted him to go there too. If he couldn't find answers yet, he wanted at least to hold his wife. That always seemed to make even the worst situations feel manageable. Cars lined both sides of his street, some parked facing the wrong direction. He'd never seen it so packed. He barely squeezed his cruiser down the narrow road to his house, where he found he could not park in the driveway because it too was full. The party was at his house. He didn't feel dizzy anymore, but feverish. Seeing all those cars at his own home beneath the fading yellow sky with pink creeping over the horizon, he just wanted someone to explain what was going on. He'd felt so sure he wasn't dreaming before. Could he have been wrong? He gave his radio one more responsible try after parking along the curb the next block over. It didn't yield any better results. Voices bled through the walls of his house as he approached the front door. They sounded loud and plentiful, but low in tone, devoid of laughter. One of the cars parked in his driveway honked once before starting up. Someone inside had started the engine remotely. He knew the car but couldn't place it at first. He grabbed the doorknob at the same time someone on the other side twisted it. Carson stepped back to allow the door to swing open. Julian Yates, a fellow officer, although not currently in uniform, opened the door, and Carson realized he'd recognized the car from the parking lot at work. Julian had his face turned toward another guest, bidding them farewell as he stepped outside. He turned, saw Carson, and froze. His face morphed like a time-lapse video, displaying a dozen emotions in a handful of seconds. He stumbled, caught himself, then froze again. "Carson?" he asked, gently closing the door behind him. "What's going on here?" Carson asked. Julian said, "Buddy, it's... Dude, where have you been?" His voice sounded laden with accusation. "I was just... Never mind, forget it. You should come inside, or... Oh, wow. Yeah, dude, come inside." Julian pushed the door back open and ushered Carson into his own crowded house. More officers, friends, extended family members, people he faintly recognized but couldn't place. It seemed everyone he'd ever crossed paths with was standing in his living room, dining room, or kitchen. A woman he did not immediately see shrieked, "Oh my God, Carson!" Carson found her when a group around her huddled, apparently to comfort her. It was his aunt. She pushed his uncle back and pointed at him, shouting, "No, Carson!" All heads turned his direction. A quiet stillness fell over the crowd. Everyone's face lost its color. "Where's Andrea?" Carson whispered to Julian. "Carson?" His wife's familiar voice, the one he'd been so desperate to hear, came from the kitchen doorway. He met her eyes. The crowd allowed her to weave through them on her way to him. She reached her arms out, then stopped, hesitating. "Andrea, what's going on?" he asked. "Why is everybody here?" Her lips trembled and a single tear slid down her cheek. She lowered her arms. He could feel their magnetic draw and wondered why she was resisting it. "Carson, she said. "Where did you go? We just had your funeral." "What?" His father emerged from somewhere he'd been unable to see before. With many gruff excuse me's, he worked his way to Carson and threw his arms around him, drawing him so tight his back cracked. "Where you been, son?" he asked. Carson broke away. "Dad, I don't get it. I was on a call during the storm and I hit a tree, but I thought I was okay, and now I'm not sure if... I don't know. Am I dead?" "Are you?" he asked, using humor to mask his own burgeoning tears. "'Cause I just hugged you to make sure you're not a ghost. You don't feel like one." Carson trailed off, meeting his wife's gaze again. He asked, "You buried me?" She shook her head. "Just your coffin. They never..." A sob she couldn't contain cut her off. He went to her, put his arms on her shoulders. She whispered, "They never found your body or your car or anything. You just disappeared, Carson. Where'd you go? Why did you leave me?" He shook his head in disbelief, still not sure he wasn't dreaming. "I was just up the hill. Then I came down and responded to a call, and he died almost a year ago." The old woman's voice echoed in his head. "How long was I gone?" he asked Andrea. His father answered, "Just about a year, son. They told us about you hitting the tree. Everybody thought you accidentally drove your car into the river or something afterward. Maybe you hit your head and didn't realize it and went off the road. We searched and searched, but you just up and vanished." "No," said Carson. "I've been here the whole time." Time. Quietly, almost to himself, he repeated, "I've been here the whole time." Andrea finally hugged him. "No," she said, "but you're here now." You made it out. Congratulations. If you enjoyed the story, please rate, like, review, or subscribe. For early, ad-free episodes and behind-the-scenes episodes called Into the Woods, become a patron at patreon.com/thewarningwoods. You can also support the show by purchasing merch. The merch store and Patreon links are in this episode's description. Follow me on Instagram at The Warning Woods to stay up to date. And when you feel ready, meet me here for another journey into the Warning Woods. Thank you for listening.